Hi, we're going to look now at long division of polynomials. So here at the top of the screen we have the same problem written two different ways. So either problem, we're going to do the problem the same way. It's just two different ways of writing the same idea. So when we read this, we have 5x squared minus 9x minus 8, that whole thing divided by the binomial x minus 3. So the tempting thing to do here is just to start crossing out things that look like they should cancel, but because we have more than one term in both the numerator and the denominator of our fraction, or more than one term in our two polynomials, if we look at how it's written out on the right, we can't just start crossing things out. We have to use long division as a method to simplify this. So the first thing we want to do is start by writing the problem set up like a division problem. So sometimes I call this writing the problem inside out. So however it's written, whether you have a fraction with one polynomial on top and a second one on the bottom, or if you have it written out horizontally with one polynomial first and then another one after that, you're going to start by writing the first polynomial that you see. So in this case, we've got 5x squared minus 9x minus 8. We want to put that inside a division sign. And then outside, we'll have the other polynomial, the x minus 3. Okay, so sometimes I call this writing the problem inside out. So whatever's written first, you put inside. Whatever's written second, you put out. All right, and then one of the big deal problems that students have with these long division problems is that they don't really understand where to focus. It just looks like a lot to look at all at once. But basically, you just want to focus on that first term, both inside and outside the division symbol. So you just really want to start by focusing on those two terms, and you want to think about, what do I have to multiply the x by to get 5x squared? So what do we want to multiply x by to get 5x squared? So we might have to think a little bit about that. First of all, for the coefficient, I'm going to need to multiply by a 5 to get the right coefficient. And then to get the right power on the x's, I will need to multiply by x. Okay? So I did that by thinking about the first term and the first term. I can't totally ignore all the other terms, but I'm not going to start by focusing on all those other terms. Just the first term inside and the first term outside. So once I've used those terms to kind of help me decide what to write up above, I'm going to erase my little highlighting here. Once I've decided what to write up above, then I'm going to take this 5x that I have up here. This is part of my quotient, and I'm going to distribute that through, or multiply that down, times each of the terms that's outside the division symbol. So I'm going to take the 5x, I'm going to multiply it times the x and times the negative 3. And I'm going to write those terms that I get from doing that right below the terms of the same degree that I'll get. So when I take 5x times x, I get 5x squared, and I write that here. And then I also need to take the 5x times the negative 3, and I'm going to write that result right here. So I'll have a minus 15x. Okay, so let's review just a little bit what we did. We looked at the first term and the first term. We used those to help us decide that the first part of our quotient here is 5x. And then I took that 5x and I distributed that through, multiplied that down times the expression that's outside here. So I'm going to go ahead and erase my little arrows so we don't end up with too much stuff going on eventually. All right, so now we're ready for the next step here. And so just like in ordinary division, if you do long division with numbers, after you multiply down, you're going to do some subtraction. You're going to subtract that second polynomial from the first one. So this is a place where sometimes students have a little bit of difficulty. When you subtract polynomials, we generally do that by distributing through the negative sign. So I'm going to actually go ahead and write that, distribute through that negative sign. So I'll take that negative sign and I'll distribute it through, and I'll end up with a negative 5 and a positive 15x. And I'm just going to go ahead and circle those, a negative 5 and a positive 15, just to kind of help me remember what I did. All right, so I distributed that minus sign through. And then we should be able to combine like terms. When you do that, these first two terms should always cancel out completely. If they don't, you've made a mistake. So I have a 5x squared minus 5x squared, and those two add up to nothing. No x squared terms left. And then I'll look at the next column here, the next group of terms that I have here. I have a negative 9x plus 15x, and I'm going to combine those. And when I do, I'll get a 6x. Okay, so at that point we've really completed the first cycle of our division problem, and now we're going to essentially repeat the process. We'll go ahead and bring down the next term here. You can bring down more than one term at a time if you want, but bring down, I just have one term left, so I'm going to bring down that next term, and then we're going to divide again. Alright, so I'm going to highlight those terms again that we need to pay attention to. So just like at the very beginning, we looked at the first term, at what we were dividing into, and the first term that we were dividing into it. We looked at those two terms to think about what we were going to divide. So I'm going to look at the x and the 6x, and I'm going to say, what do I need to multiply the x by to get 6x? What do I need to multiply the x by to get 6x? So we're going to need to multiply by a 6. So I'm going to want to put a 6 up here in my quotient, but I need to make sure that that 6 is a separate term from the 5x. So I need an addition or subtraction sign in between there. Since it's going to be a positive 6, I'm going to put a plus 6 there. Alright, so we looked at the first term and first term to help us decide what we were going to multiply by, and then we decided that was a plus 6. So I'm going to go ahead and erase my highlighting here so that that's not too distracting. Okay, and then we're going to do what we did before. Remember before we took that 5x that we had out front and we distributed that down times everything that was in front. We're going to do that again, but just with the new term that we've put in our quotient up here. So it's just that 6 that's going to be distributed times the x and the minus 3. Okay, so when I do that, I will end up with 6 times x will be 6x, and then 6 times the minus 3 will be minus 18. Okay, let me erase my arrows so we don't end up with too many things on the paper here all at the same time. Alright, next, just like we did in the previous step, after I multiply down, we're going to want to subtract the second row. And so as we subtract, we're going to distribute that minus sign through. So I'm going to distribute that through. This will become a negative 6 and a positive 18. And I went ahead and circled those so that if I have to go back and look through my work later, I'll remember what I did, that I changed the signs on those. Okay, so again, the first terms should cancel. 6x minus 6x, that should add up to 0. If it doesn't, if your first terms don't cancel, you've made a mistake. Okay, and then the next terms here, I have a negative 8 plus 18, so that leaves me a positive 10. Okay, so we're going to keep going here until now we're done on this one, and the reason we can tell we're done is the degree, so that has to do with the power on the x, the degree of the polynomial that I have out front is bigger than the degree of what I have left inside here. There's no x's left here, my remainder. So once we get to that point, then what we have here at the end is our remainder. And we're actually done with the problem. It's just a matter of writing our answer. So when we write our answer, we're going to basically write it in the form where we have our quotient. That is kind of the answer to our division problem that we created up at the top of our division problem. That'll be sitting on top of your division sign. And then plus the remainder. In this case, that's the 10 over what's called the divisor, and the divisor is the expression that's out front of the division symbol. Okay, so when I use that format to write my answer for this problem, we will have 5x plus 6 as our quotient, and then plus our remainder was 10 over x minus 3. Okay, and of course sometimes you end up with a remainder that's 0. If your remainder had been 0, then you just don't have a little fraction here at the end. But if there's some remainder left in the problem, which often there will be, you'll end up with this little fraction added on to the end, and remember that you will still have a denominator there. It's going to be whatever the denominator was in the original problem, if it was written as a fraction, or whatever that second polynomial was in the original problem, if it was written out horizontally at the beginning of the problem.